I'm going to tell you about the Commonwealth. Do you know about the Commonwealth? The Commonwealth started from James I, who succeeded Elizabeth, and his son Charles I believed that the power of king was God-given and shouldn't be controlled by the people. Charles refused to call parliament together, raised money without the consent of the people, and did many illegal acts. Civil war, however, soon broke out between him and the people, who were led in military matters by Oliver Cromwell as a Puritan. The fortune of war went against Charles. He was taken prisoner and was beheaded in 1649. The form of government was then changed to a Commonwealth or Republic, and Cromwell became protector in 1653.
He continued in power until his death in 1659, and then in 1660 the people called back to England the son of Charles I, who had been in exile on the continent. His coming restored the old kingly line of rules and is spoken of in history as the Restoration. The Puritans believed in simplicity of life. They disapproved of the sonnets and the love of poetry written in the previous period. In 1642, the theaters were closed. The Bible became now the one of the book of the people. The Puritans' influence in general tended to suppress literary art, yet this art, stern sect produced a great poet like John Milton and a great prose writer like John Bunyan. John Milton as a poet ranks next to Shakespeare. Some critics call him the last of the Elizabethans because his writings show many of the qualities which they possessed. Milton's life extends from 1608 to 1674. He was born in London, attended several private schools, and at the age of 16 entered Christ's College in Cambridge. While at the college, he showed marked ability as a poet by composing on the death of the fair infant and on the morning of Christ's nativity. Milton's father, who was a Puritan, owned a country seat at Horton, not far from London. To this country seat young Milton went after leaving college, and there he spent nearly 6 years reading Greek and Latin authors, leading a quiet, peaceful life, experimenting with poetry. Even thus early he had resolved to write at some time a grand poem, but he hadn't decided what his subject should be. The poems of Milton's youth. During the time which he spent at Horton, Milton wrote the poems L'Argot, Penseroso, Comus, and Lycidas. The first two, the titles of which mean the cheerful man and the thoughtful man, show Milton's observation and appreciation of the nature, as well as his attitude toward life. In L'Argot, he tells the pleasures which would delight him if his mood were mirthful, and into Penseroso, those that would please him if his mood were sad. The first of these poems is musical and the third is sublime. The first one is Comus, which is masculine touches upon the beauty of the temperance and chastity and the ugliness of Riotus in Ducklins. It shows Milton to be a true poet, grave and grand, able to write good blank verse and good lyrics. In fact, the poetry in this masque is finer than that in any other masque in the English language. The second one in Lycidas. Milton mourns for a learned friend who was drowned at sea. He imitates in some measure the old Greek poems, but he also improves on the lines of the old in Greek and produces exquisite poetry. And then trip on the continent. In 1638, Milton set out for a trip on the continent. He visited Paris and then went on to Italy, spending many delightful hours with men of learning. The news of political troubles in England, however, reached his ear, and in 1639 he returned to aid his countrymen in the struggle against the king. Milton's first period after Charles I was beheaded. Milton served the state as Latin secretary and continued in that capacity until Charles II's return in 1660. With exception of a few sonnets, during this period Milton which they had taken in resisting the tyranny of Charles I. He wrote on an education in favor of doing away with the license required for printing books. For the last year, from 1660 until his death, Milton lived quietly in London and turned his attention against to poetry. From overuse of his eyes in 1652, he became totally blind and was obliged to ask the assistance of his daughters in writing his thoughts. The writing of the grand poem which he had in mind in his youth was the task which he now attempted. Taking his first theme, man's first disobedience, he wrote the epic Paradise Lost. This was published in 1667 and was followed in 1671 by Paradise Regained. Paradise Lost in Milton's greatest work. It tells of the threefold of the angels under Satan, of their expulsion from Eve, and of their plans for revenge by coming to earth and tempting man to disobey God. In telling this story, strong imagination is needed to picture the scenes in heaven and hell elsewhere. A lofty conception of the characters is also necessary, for God and the angels, as well as Satan and his followers, have parts to play. Exalted sentiments too must be expressed by characters raised too high above mortals, and dignified, stately expression must voice their sentiments. That Paradise Lost in grand imagination and poetic expression, no one will deny.
And then John Bunyan, 1628 until 1688, was the author of the most imaginative prose which his period produced. His talent lay in writing allegories, stories with a double meaning, where characters are named according to the certain properties which they possess. In Pilgrim's Progress, which is Bunyan's greatest book, abstract qualities as wisdom and flattery are made to act as person. Pilgrim, the hero, stands for the true Christian, and the story is the record of his journey from the city of destruction to the celestial city. Beside vivid imagination, Bunyan shows strong dramatic power. His language is earnest and simple, and was firm from reading the Bible, which he knew almost by heart. He wrote several other books beside Pilgrim's Progress, namely The Life and Death of Mr. Batman and The Holy War, but his fame rests on Pilgrim's Progress, which is the greatest prose allegory in the English language. Bunyan's writings are the result of genius, for Bunyan had no literary training and hardly any education whatever. He was the son of the traveling thinker and grew up amid most uncouth surroundings. When he was about 20, he became deeply concerned for the welfare of his soul, and when he thought his own salvation had been attained, he became a preacher to others. Many of his talks were given out of doors, and he preached without sanction of the English church. He was arrested and thrown into jail, where he was kept for nearly 12 years. While in jail, he wrote the first part of Pilgrim's Progress. John Dryden, 1631 until 1700, was the son of a salaryman, had a university education, and made up his mind to earn his livelihood by writing. He forms the consenting link between the age of Puritan influence and the age of the Restoration. He knew Milton and sometimes visited him, but he lacked Milton's firmness of the chapter. Having made up his mind to support himself by his pen, he was careful to keep in favor with the ruling powers. When Charles II was king, Dryden was Episcopalian, When James I took the throne, he became a Catholic and he did best in writing for each religious sect in turn. He devoted his whole life to literature and became the acknowledged literary leader of the time. Dryden's greatest poem is a satire called Absalom and Achitophel. Under these names from the Bible, two prominent political leaders of the day, the Earl of Salisbury and the Duke of Monmouth, are satirized. Their friends and associates also come in for a share for ridicule, for skillful drawing of character in a situation, and for keenness of attack on individuals. This poem ranks first among English political satires.